This is an Irish independent podcast.
If you look at Leo himself, so he wears an Apple Watch. He was tweeting as a cardinal. I mean, he has kind of engaged in back and forths on what is now X with people who he disagrees with, not directly, but he has subtweeted. He subtweeted J.D. Vance before he became Pope. He's confronted guys like Peter Thiel because a lot of the Silicon Valley guys would regard AI as being the new religion, and quite literally, not figuratively, but literally, as in if you're against AI or if you're in favor of regulating AI, you are the Antichrist.
You're listening to The Big Tech Show with Adrian Weckler, sponsored by Deal. Deal lets you hire, manage, pay, and equip anyone, anywhere. Visit DEEL.com/bigtech.
Hello and you're welcome to The Big Tech Show with me, Adrian Weckler. Today we're going to talk about AI agents that can break out and hack other systems by themselves, the Pope's prayer app, which committed a serious sin, and devices to keep you cool in the unusual summer heat. I'm joined by Dee Reddy in the studio. We're going to start with this unusual story about OpenAI's AI agent that somehow broke out of its secure sandbox they were testing and invaded another AI company's system by itself.
This is kind of wild.
Weird.
Yeah. So I guess to start off with, who exactly are Hugging Face?
Yeah, so two companies, OpenAI, who
Sounds
we
like
know,
something from Aliens.
and we'll discuss whether or not this is science fiction later on, but two companies, OpenAI, which we know is ChatGPT, and Hugging Face, which is a kind of a repository online for developers, researchers to share things like AI models, data sets, interactive web demos. So it is very much in the AI ecosystem. Now, what happened here, seemingly, according to the two companies and according to what we can glean, is that OpenAI was testing some of its new AI models, and it gave them a really hard test related to computer hacking, because one of the big stories about AI agents now is whether they can be used to hack. And we're all a bit worried about that.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why Anthropic's newest model earlier in the year was delayed, because they said it was too powerful and it could be used to hack systems and it would be a security nightmare for everyone involved. Well, anyway, OpenAI decided it was going to give its latest systems a really hard test, and it slightly relaxed the security rules for these models. So it put it in what's called a sandbox, and a sandbox, as a lot of listeners and viewers will know, is a secure system that is set apart from, say, the internet. So there's only a certain amount it can do, but there was a proxy in this sandbox. So in other words, the AI models, they were allowed to operate, and they were also allowed to request third-party software through a little tunnel into the sandbox.
Wow.
Okay, a proxy. Now, what the AI model did here, or two of them, is rather than figure out the answer within the sandbox, they figured out essentially how to hack the tunnel out of the sandbox, the proxy, if you like, through the third-party software. So we don't know what the third-party software is. It could have been an internet tool. It could have been one of the software programs that we use every day. They haven't told us. But whatever it was, OpenAI's tool found a previously undiscovered exploit or weakness in whatever that third-party software was. This is how clever the AI agent is. Hacked it, got out into the internet, and then decided, and we don't know why this is either, but it decided to target Hugging Face, this repository for other AI tools, because it may have thought that the answer to its unbelievably hard problem that it was set could be found in one of the tools or some of the data based in the Hugging Face repository. So it got in there, and it was in there for days before anyone knew what was going on. It stole login credentials. It changed quite a few things. Now, it didn't do any real damage, but we're all slightly freaked out about it, because this could be an early warning that the AI agents in particular are getting powerful enough to get around security controls that we put around them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is this a sign that we've reached a point where sandbox
Mm.
or sandboxing isn't really enough anymore?
I think the opinion is split on that.
Okay.
So a lot of technology purists would say, no, sandboxes are that one of the issues here
Just don't put tunnels into
yeah,
them.
just don't put tunnels. Don't give proxies. One of the issues was that OpenAI or Anthropic, the big frontier AI models, normally they have pretty tight controls on what you can do with those tools to prevent things like hacking. They relaxed those a little bit for this example, just because they wanted to see what exactly their AI agents are capable of. Now they kind of have the answer now, and it has left a lot of us with a lot of questions. I mean, in reaction to this, just in the last 24 hours, a couple of big companies, including NVIDIA, which is the huge AI chip maker, they have formed a new organization, a new coalition around safety, because this is going to freak people out. It is already freaking people out. You'll remember a few weeks ago that the US government put export controls on Anthropic's new AI model. In other words, what the US government said was that nobody who is not American
should have access
can
to
use this tool. And that was really serious for us in Europe, because we're building out our infrastructure, government, hospitals, utilities, on using Anthropic, using OpenAI. OpenAI is a very cozy relationship with the government here, and the US government was able to essentially put a kill switch on that. But this latest hacking incident might sort of fan the flames of that. The reason why the US government did that, they were afraid that these tools might become too powerful.
Is there any sense, though, Adrian? Because, like as you've said, this isn't the first type of story of this nature that we've heard. And I suppose one thing that these stories suggests is just how powerful this technology is, and how we're moving into an age that was previously unknown except out of sci-fi movies. Is there any sense that you have that there is a performative element to it, that it benefits the companies, for people to perceive them as being this unstoppable force?
Yeah, there's a strong whiff of that, isn't
Okay,
there?
yeah.
There's a very strong whiff of that.
I was just checking that it wasn't just me.
And that is one of the accusations here. So a couple of things. First of all, the AI industry has a strong track record in the last couple of years of kind of scare marketing. The stuff I mentioned a moment ago about Anthropic's Mythos model being delayed and then not being allowed to be exported from the US, that you could argue that was part of a big awareness exercise to show just how powerful and amazing Anthropic is. Now, and also bear in mind that both Anthropic and OpenAI are preparing for public flotations, for IPOs. It's in their interest for the world to be talking about them, to the world to be talking how unbelievably powerful, and everything has to go through these models. The other thing we probably have to ask harder questions on in this incident is why did OpenAI's agent, which escaped its sandbox, why did it choose Hugging Face, a repository for AI tools? And what I mean by that is, it looks like this may have benefited Hugging Face's brand also, because it gives them an opportunity and a platform to go out and talk about what they're doing, and to remind everybody that Hugging Face is there, and that OpenAI's tool, when looking for the smartest, best, quickest answers, went to Hugging Face. So we're now talking about OpenAI and Hugging Face as these sort of uber powerful systems. So look, you would sort of maybe want to be a conspiracy theorist to say that this was all stitched up, but there are definitely hard questions there to be asked.
And what does it mean then, I suppose, for security around these type of models in the future?
I think we're in a constant non-stop lesson learning mode at the moment when it comes to AI models, because even despite the hype, they are improving in capability quite substantially every few months. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't hype. And, if you read guys like Ed Zitron, for example, if you follow his work, he's very much of the view that a lot of this is just vaporware and that they're not capable of doing half the stuff that they are tagged as doing. But the security implications here are real.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a story we'll come back to quite a lot. Now, I'm going to pivot slightly here because talking of OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
that company has just announced that it is going to hire an extra 250 people in Dublin, in Ireland.
Okay.
And it's going to move into this giant, big new warehouse in the Docklands and hire an extra 250 people. This is very interesting to me because both OpenAI and Anthropic now, the two biggest AI companies together now, have announced jobs of about 600 roughly in Dublin in the last 6 to 8 months. Mm-hmm. We had an announcement 2 weeks ago from Intel. They're putting €5 billion into their Kildare plant to make more chips, essentially, which is a byproduct of the AI boom. And it looks like in Dublin, AI might be creating jobs rather than zapping them.
Yeah, because that's completely at odds, I suppose, with a lot of the narrative that's been around AI with regards to the job market in recent years. Do you think that that's a trend that's going to continue, though, or is it a short-term win?
I don't know. I think the wind might be changing a little bit on the AI destroying jobs narrative. So, and look, let's be clear, a bit of context here. There have been quite a few tech jobs lost in Ireland this year. So about a month ago, TikTok announced 300 layoffs. That was really largely AI focused. Now, some of those roles were because they were related to agency work as well. One of the biggest agencies, Covalent, which did a lot of work for Meta, they announced what's believed to be 700 layoffs. And there's other companies as well, Oracle, Amazon, Meta, Coinbase, all Dublin-based, with some layoffs, and a lot of that was AI-related. So I'd say in the red, you probably have over 1,000 layoffs so far in Dublin.
Wow.
In the last 8 months. In the black, you might have maybe 600 to 700, maybe more. If you include the Intel jobs announced, it's probably close to 1,000 as well. So what is weird is that no matter what happens, Dublin and Ireland seems to, like a cockroach, we seem to crawl out of the apocalypse with a bunch of tech jobs and tech investment. No matter what happens, we seem to survive the life cycle.
Do we know yet what roles they're going to be hiring for in
Yeah,
Ireland?
they've OpenAI, they've talked about engineering, sales, marketing, finance, HR, regulatory, which is one of the main reasons that a lot of these companies are in Dublin, because of the regulators that we have here. And this is a place because regulation is so important because of the activist nature of the EU, but also to bear in mind the value of these jobs to people who get them. So when Anthropic announced its 300 jobs, the first tranche, which were probably the best paid of the jobs, but you were talking about software engineering roles, salaries of 230 grand. You're talking about sales positions, 200 grand, even payroll staff, 120, 130,000 euro a year. These are really highly paid jobs.
And how AI safe are they in the future?
Well, these are AI companies that are hiring these people. So it's a weird irony and it's a weird quirk that
they might be filled by people who have been replaced in other companies.
There was a good piece in the Wall Street Journal this week about this. A lot of companies in the US are starting to finish their job cutting programs and they're starting to hire people more back. I mean, don't forget Google in Dublin. Google's a real outlier for some reason in Ireland. Google went from 5,000 staff last year to 6,000 this year. They've hired 1,000 people in the last 18 months. And that's really gone under the radar.
Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom when it goes to AI. Now, there has been an overall fall in the number of people employed in what they call the is it the ICT sector? These are figures from the Central Statistics Office. So overall, we don't have as many people employed in that sector.
Okay.
But if you look at the roles that are being announced here, it's certainly not as dark as we might have reported on before.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on your overall listening experience. It only takes a minute, and your feedback helps us improve what we do. When you take part, you'll also be in with a chance to win a €500 One for All voucher. Visit mypodcastfeedback.com and enter your code TECH. That's TECH. Thank you for helping us shape the future of what we do.
The Pope has had a very interesting baptism of fire recently when it comes to technology, because he had don't forget his encyclical recently about AI, and that was really interesting. I urge anyone who hasn't had a look at that, who's casually interested, well worth a read. Some really interesting ideas in there. But what we're talking today is about his app, the prayer app, which basically has leaked its users' information. Over 700,000 users. And the app is called Click to Pray. And I
feel like definitely with the artistic vision of the Vatican, they could have come up with a better name.
Yeah, it's operated by the Pope's Worldwide Prayer Network, which is a Vatican foundation.
Okay.
And it's officially promoted as a way of praying alongside the Pope. However, a security researcher using the name Bob the Hacker discovered that that both the website and the app had a really basic security flaw, and that was that every user of it was given a numerical account number, so that you could, if you change the number in the web address, the URL at the top of your web browser on your laptop screen, if you just changed the number, you could possibly be into somebody else's account and retrieve their details. It's pretty basic error. 720,000 registered accounts. So it was fixed, and it's not clear that anyone's details were actually stolen, because it was an ethical hacker that brought this to the attention of the Vatican.
Well, that's only appropriate.
Yes, absolutely.
But tell me, how common are these types of prayer apps? Because I've certainly seen a lot more advertising for it on social media.
Yeah, the big one is Hallow. I'm not sure if you've seen...
Absolutely, because there's loads of celebrities that have endorsement with
Mark
that.
Wahlberg. I've seen for some reason I have seen quite a few of his.
He's the least surprising for me. Gwen Stefani was a real shocker.
Yeah, Gwen Stefani.
Chris Pratt's in there as well.
He is. Chris Pratt's in there. Andrea Bocelli, Russell Brand. I think that's a conversion. Born of events related to
that's a whole
court
separate
cases
conversation,
and other
I
things.
think. Yeah.
Bear Grylls, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you look at what prayer apps actually do, it's usually kind of an audio guided prayer or a meditation, Bible readings, rosaries, sleep stories. So like the Vatican one, Click to Pray, has 3 short prayer sessions every day. It gives you the Pope's monthly prayer intentions, reminders. It gives you all of this stuff in several languages. And there's a community where people can post intentions and pray for one another. So
isn't that interesting, actually, that the Pope's one kind of follows the fact that, like, under Catholicism, you're not encouraged in the same way as in Protestant Christianity to have your own sort of commune with. It's just kind of interesting how it's been adapted so seamlessly.
The difference there between, I was brought up Catholic, so I'm more familiar with that, but I have some relations who are Protestant, or they're American Protestants, which is different again, because they divide into all sorts of different churches. But like, we're not encouraged really to read the Bible. They are.
Yes.
It's a huge.
We have the Bible read to us.
To us, yeah. So they would know their, as they call it, their scripture.
Sure.
And they sort of, weave in and out of conversations or speeches. But I mean, these are very popular apps. I mean, Hallow has 24 million installations.
Wow.
It's very, very popular. It claims to have more than 1 billion prayer sessions completed. So I think the Pope needs to do a little bit better on his security. But if you haven't read his encyclical, it's well worth.
I was going to say, he seems to be the first Pope that's really actively engaged with the sort of overlap that I guess is increasingly existing between theology and technology, if you're so way inclined.
Well, if you look at Leo himself, so he wears an Apple Watch. He was tweeting, as a cardinal. I mean, he has kind of engaged in back and forths on what is now X with people who he disagrees with, not directly, but he has subtweeted. He subtweeted J.D. Vance before he became Pope. He's taken kind of direct. He's confronted guys like Peter Thiel indirectly. We had a whole episode on that because a lot of the Silicon Valley guys would regard AI as being the new religion, and quite literally, and not figuratively, but literally, as in if you're against AI or if you're in favor of regulating AI, you are the Antichrist. There's an entire lecture series that Peter Thiel has gone on.
And then you also have the kind of offshoot of transhumanism and all of that as well.
Which is another kind of very colourful thing that, that we actually did another episode on that. But so look, if you're using Click to Pray and you start getting any dodgy text messages or emails, maybe that's the
that
reason
could be why. And if you're not using it and you end up very, very overheated because you're in the depths of hell, what are your recommendations for keeping cool in this Irish summer that we're having?
It's the first time in, I think, my entire career as a tech journalist that I've had to look into and review like fans, air conditioners, water-based humidifiers to, because we're not used to hot heat. And yet we've had now 5 weeks of it, pretty much nonstop. Anyway, so I did look into it. And if you walk into your Currys, your Harvey Normans, your DIDs, your Power Cities, most of what you see are just fancy fans. So Dyson, for example, would have one of the leading, what they call tower fans, like a slim sort of oblong 4 foot, 5 foot fan with a big gap in the middle, but it's really just a fan. And it uses the term, I think it uses the term cool or cooling, but actually what it means is it feels cool on your skin. So it doesn't actually make the air colder, right? So that is, I think they're walking the line there when it comes to, advertising and being completely accurate there. But their version, their truth is that it feels cool on your skin.
So that wouldn't be your choice.
Well, so what they're
pricey.
Good. So I'll go through the options here. So you've got your dinky little handheld fans or neck fans. I don't know if you've seen those. I've seen a few of them around town actually in the last few weeks.
I've seen, and I saw someone giving out on social media actually recently because she'd been at a gig and the person behind her was using one of those, and when they put their arms up in the air, they got her hair caught in it and actually took out chunks of it. So she was kind of doing a PSA to people to be careful where you're waving your fan about.
I'm a big fan, but like a lot of them you'll pick up for like a tenner, in just a discount
alley
shop.
Hopper.
Or even in
Tiger.
Just Tiger, the cheapo shops around town. And really they're just very simple. That's just to blow air against your face again, because it feels kind of cool. I suppose the fanciest model there is one by Dyson. It's called HushJet Portable Mini. Costs €99 from all of the big electronic stores. The big thing there is it actually is unbelievably powerful, even though it fits into your hand. It looks a bit like a lightsaber. So this is maybe the size of just a little bit bigger than an iPhone 17 Pro Max or any sort of 7-inch, 6-inch smartphone. But moving on from that, then you have the tower fans, and what the tower fans are good for, and the model I mentioned there was Dyson's Cool Tower Fan, and that's the upper price range, to almost 400 quid, but you can get them for about €100. What they are good at is, a lot of people, their apartment or their house or wherever they live, one room will be a lot hotter than the other, and they're very good at redirecting, at recirculating cooler air into the house from cooler parts of the room, of the house.
Yeah.
So they are kind of worth it if you're in that situation. But if you actually want a device that makes the air around you cooler, you've two options. One is a water-based air cooler.
I have one of those.
Do you? And how do you find it?
Love it.
Oh, and do you have anything to swap out, like a water tank or anything?
So there's a tank at the back that you put. They're like little blue refreezable bottles. So you can put both in if it's a particularly hot evening. Sometimes then I would actually top it up with extra ice from the freezer as well, or if we've forgotten to swap out the blue bottles.
And what room do you use it in?
Generally just the bedroom, but if it's a very, very hot day and, you're working from home or you have people coming over, it's really, really great for bringing the room temperature down just in one room. Yeah.
So that seems to be the typical use, exactly as you've spoken there. Bedrooms at night can be particularly uncomfortable in the warm weather. And this will lower the air temperature maybe by a couple of degrees at best. It's not, if you were in, France or even London, it's 33 degrees, you're not going to get 20 degrees out of this.
Honestly, you'd be surprised. I've had
big drop.
A big drop.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, if you get the cooler sufficiently filled with ice and ice cold things, and then you put
how big is your room that's happening?
It's a decent size, it's bigger than this room, and you get the swing kind of element on with it as well, and then obviously max
power.
Well,
you're doing well there, and you're beating the odds, because typically those water-based air coolers are usually good for a couple of degrees, enough to make it a bit more comfortable. If you really want something to make the air colder, you have to go for a proper portable air conditioner. And they are bigger, they're clunkier, they're not particularly nice looking. And the main thing is they need an outlet out of your house. So it has to be a pipe that goes through a wall, or it can be out the window as well. You can have a pipe that goes out the window. So if you see in America, for example, air conditioners, a lot of them, the old-fashioned ones, you'll see it kind of propped up on a windowsill, and you'll see like boards on either side. And because what an air conditioner actually does is it uses electricity, it refrigerates the air, and it sucks in the air from the warm place, refrigerates it, and then puts it back out as cold air. But it has to have somewhere for the warm air to go, right? And that is outside, so it expels it.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah. So they're kind of, this is not a common item to find in Ireland. Dimplex, which a lot of people would know, they have one which is pretty decent. It's called the portable Dimplex 2.6 kilowatt portable air conditioner with dehumidifier. It's about €500 from outlets. If you can get one, by the way, and I was looking into this, an awful lot of them were sold out. But it has a cooling capacity of 9,000 BTU. Now, BTU is the term of measurement. It's a British thermal unit. That's what they call it. And it essentially, the bigger the number, the more it will actually cool your room or your house. But this will take your room or your house down from 30 degrees to 20 degrees.
Oh wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. So it's a big drop. The higher the number, the better, the more cooling it will go. And you'll see, you can pay a lot of money for air conditioners. You can have one built into your house, but that is, you're in sort of, 5, 10, 15, 20 grand at that point. And it's kind of, I'm not sure in Ireland if that many people will do that. It reminds me of, the odd snowstorm we get once every 5 years, and everybody goes out and buys all-wheel drive.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Given it's how many years that you've been reporting on tech, and it's the first time
Yeah.
that this has been a technology that you've needed to look into. What do you think is the best recommendation of those 4 different types?
I think the one that you went for, which was the air cooler, is probably the best bang for your buck, because they tend to cost, you can get one of those for €100, €130, €150. The one that I looked at was called the Princess Smart, which is €130 from Woody's. Some of them are a little bit more expensive than that. But if you get into your portable air conditioners like the Dimplex one I mentioned, you're into €500 up.
Okay.
You're there. So if you think that you're only going to need it for a couple of weeks a year, then maybe you may only need it for, say, your bedroom. Then maybe I think the way to go is what you have done. Whereas on the other hand, if this is what we're now to expect with climate change, then maybe we'll be revisiting this and I'll be saying, well, you should be going for the proper air conditioners from now on. Anyway, on that positive and non-gloomy note, we shall wrap it up there. Dee Reddy, thank you very much for joining us today. Gav Hennessy was on sound and JJ Clark produces The Big Tech Show. I'm Adrian Weckler and you've been listening to or watching The Big Tech Show. Talk to you soon.